The title is Being a Person While Also Being Not a Thing or Everything. Nice. So when I say not a thing, everything, like that's really confusing. So everybody has different language for this. Some people might call the same thing consciousness, I amness, isness, beingness, God, the divine, stillness. I don't know if all our meanings are the same, but it feels like a lot of the time when they're using those words, there is a similarity. And in the end, they always say, and it feels like that, you can break everything down to no thing or everything, because, yeah, they're kind of the same thing. So they always say, oh, it goes deeper than consciousness, or it keep deeper than I amness. But those little details, like, I don't really want to be pernickety about it at the moment. Like, leave them for another conversation. At the moment, I would like to use all of those simultaneously, synonymously. So being a person while being consciousness, or being a person while being God. The God one I would be careful of, because that really like goes into the realm of like narcissism, and it's difficult to say, but I mean that's ultimately what it's saying. Yeah. It's a big subject. It's so spectacularly, marvelously brilliant subject. I love this subject. I'm so in love with non-duality. It absolutely saved my life. I know I've said that many times before, but just because of a lot of trauma in childhood and also having severe dyslexia, I didn't really have a chance in this world for things not to have been catastrophic. And I feel so sorry for people that have worse traumas, because my traumas were bad, but I know that there's people that, you know, are brought up in wars and war zones and like really awful situations, like where there's no security or no safety at all, and there's no chance for them. Like when that's so severe, it's very hard to get over those traumas. And I just feel like non-duality saved my life. I had to do loads of therapy and emotional work and still work on the personality, but the realization and the energetic shift really like changed the experience. You know, when I was younger, there was a lot of suffering in my day-to-day experience, a lot of discomfort in the body, a lot of aches and pains, a lot of emotional discomfort, reactivity. And then when I had this energetic shift, then most of the time now, I still have reactivity and problems and screw up, but most of the time on a day-to-day level, I feel happy. And that's huge. What a change. Even though I can still get triggered into my traumas, like I genuinely feel happy on the human level. And I think a lot of people can report that back from non-duality. Non-duality also has its pitfalls, and there's dangerous sides to non-duality, and I can see that, and we can speak about that another time. It's something you should be aware of. But I don't think therapy alone would have even made a dent. I think the recognition and therapy as well worked really well here, but it was just too strong. That energetic shift like just blasted away a lot of that difficulty and trauma. Yeah. The combination of working on the person and non-duality is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Yeah. So let's get to it. So what does it mean living as a person and living as nothing and everything? So we're going to go for the nothing and everything side first, because that's what I always do. I always like to go over again and again what that means, and then we'll come back to how that then integrates to also holding a person. or containing a person, and how the human experience needs an ego or a person, which a lot of people disagree with. And that's great, disagree with me. Please don't take my word as God. Like, ultimately we're all God, so every word is God, but like, this is something that I really dislike in the non-duality teacher. It's like, the teacher is right, this person is right. There is no right intellectual thoughts, and every human is vulnerable. No, that's a word, like destructible. Like, every person makes mistakes and has wrong ideas. Even if you've obtained a lot of freedom, there still can be wrong ideas in there, because ideas are something that change, like clouds, and morph, and you get more clouds and you understand more things or more ideas and you have better perspective. So please do not ever take my word on things. Just use it as trampolines, like jumping boards, to jump higher, like to expand more and to see things in a deeper way. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying, which is, don't take my word on it. So I can't circle that one back. Make a nice, neat circle. So non-duality is an energetic shift in the end. It's not a belief system or a way of thinking. It's an energetic shift from being contracted to boundlessness. And it's this seeing of this emptiness of everything, and how that emptiness is also full of everything. So if we go out of those words and we begin to go into consciousness, which is the easier way to teach, trust me. Consciousness is, way easier to teach than nothing and everything. So if we go from consciousness, it's this waking up to see that everything is watching. There is not a singular place that watching is coming from. So when there is what you could call a sleep, like the opposite to awakeness, like a sleep, the consciousness and the person are interwound in a way. They ultimately aren't, because consciousness can never be sucked into a person, but it feels like that. So what most people on this planet feel like is that they as a person are conscious, and they as a person are walking around this planet, have a cup of tea, eating a cheeseburger. So they are an independent person with choice and free will, and they kind of have this like person inside their head that's like always narrating things like really quickly, and it feels like it's choosing things, and it feels like it's protecting you, stopping you from interacting with that bad person or that bad person, or informing you about when the train comes. Like, it's always a voice, a thought. So you could say it's like thoughts, but it's also feelings and this energy. Like, you feel like you're someone in the head, and you feel like you're this body. So often I don't say it's like thoughts. A lot of teachers say that, and that is a nice pointer, because by the time people get into this subject, their thoughts are so chaotic and like going out into all neurotic avenues that it's nice to point out that it's thoughts, but it's also an energy of feeling contracted, and it's also the emotions as well. I mean, can we even really separate out the emotions and the thoughts? They're so interconnected. Like, you have an emotion and then lots of thoughts come, or you have lots of thoughts and the emotion comes, but all of this feels like you. And initially when you get into this subject, a lot of it can be about changing the thoughts and examining the thoughts, which is a super great, amazingly brilliant process to go through. To look at what you think and question what you think. And also with the feelings as well. This is often what's done in therapy, is like an investigation of what you think and what you feel. Not in all therapies, but in therapies that I kind of tend to like. It's like a bodily, emotional and thought examination. And so it's not, the therapist can teach you things, but it's more that the therapist is pointing you into connecting up the thoughts and the emotions, because often they're really out of whack. So what used to happen in me, I have to talk about me again. I always feel like, I do these hour-and-a-half talks and talk more about myself than I do in the whole entire week. Okay, forget me. I'm not going to give me as an example. I've given me as an example for 11 years now. I'm boring. I'm a boring fart. I enjoy doing the most mundane, boring things. Like rock climbing. No, I'm joking. So what can happen, for an example of this, is that when you first get into this subject, or before you get into therapy, you can be totally disconnected from your feelings, sometimes to such an extreme way that you don't even know that you're having feelings. So your body just feels dead or unalive. You just feel like you're a walking head. Then you can have the extreme opposite, where it's like people are just so overwrought with emotion. I'm sure you've met somebody like that, where it's just like a hurricane being involved with them, that their emotions are really all over the shop. And then other people are like a spectrum in between. So what can happen in the beginning is that your thoughts about the situation are stronger than your feelings. It doesn't mean that feelings are more true than thoughts. It's just that when this is out of line, you don't really know what's going on in this system, and you don't really know what's happening, and your mind tells you lots of fibs. So for an example, you could be driving in the car with your partner, and they could be saying something and you feel angry. But on the thinking level, you don't recognize that. So the body is angry, but the thoughts aren't narrating, I feel anger now. And because they're not narrating, I feel anger now, there actually isn't a knowing that there's anger there. So it's the anger begins to act, or is acting just unconsciously. So then it will push the person into doing certain things that the person isn't conscious of. So the person isn't narrating that they feel angry. Maybe they're narrating that they're having a good time. Or maybe they're narrating that the partner is being a jerk. But maybe not. They might not even be narrating that the person's being a jerk. They just might be getting more and more angry. And then what happens in the person is the person maybe lashes out passive aggressively. But again, the person doesn't narrate that and they have no clue. So what's happened is, at the end of the interaction, the person might feel all uncomfortable, but they don't really understand what's happened. So their body is pushing them into behaving in certain ways, like this anger is pushing them into behaving passively aggressively. But because they're not narrating this, because they're cut off from the body, they don't know that's happening. So they could be passively aggressively, and then maybe the partner feels upset by this, and they're like, oh, did I do something to upset you? Are you angry? And you might have experienced this with people before, and they're like, no, there's nothing wrong, I'm absolutely fine. And they kind of like pretend that they're okay, but to them that's their reality. They don't know that they're not okay. So you can see it can create really chaotic interactions. So then the partner feels all confused because it seems like the other person's angry, but they say they're not, and then the partner doesn't know what they want or need, and then you can get into huge rows, and like this really complicated dialogue. And I never really talk about this level so much because but this is normally what you get into at the beginning of non-duality. Like you come to non-duality and you're like, yeah, my life's a mess, I'm a mess, there's a problem, I do not feel good every day. And so you get into these types of therapies to understand this behavior, and I kind of like hint towards it. And when I work one-to-one with people, I do this type of work, but I don't talk about it too much in my talks because I assume that you're doing this, and I assume that people have done this already and know about this. But maybe there's some people in the audience that don't. That's not a bad thing. Don't feel shame and like, oh, I'm at the beginning, I've done something wrong, I don't know. Like, that's not what's being said, and there is no beginning and end, and you don't need to, you see, these are all these complex thoughts, you don't need to get into that story, like that's a story. So in the beginning, when you get into non-duality, you begin to examine your thoughts and your feelings, and what might happen is you might go through a process of becoming a more authentic person. And to me, what this means is you begin to line up the thoughts and the feelings more astutely. It's not that you get rid of your conditioning. From doing this, your conditioning will heal and change, but you begin to become more authentic. So say 5 years down the line, after you've done lots of therapy and been into non-duality, you're in the car with your partner, and your partner is doing something which is irritating you. This time though, instead of being completely unconscious of the whole thing, you're conscious of it. So you're sitting there, you're driving along, and the thoughts say, hang on, there's something wrong here, I feel uncomfortable. Then there is an investigation, like, I feel angry. And then you might be like, what is it that I'm not getting which is producing anger? Because often anger is about you not getting something in some way, or your wants or your needs not being met. So then you might question, like, what are my wants and my needs here? And then you might realize, oh, my partner's I feel like my partner's being dismissive to me. It might not be a truth. He may or may not be dismissive to you. We don't know that. But what we do know is that you feel like that. So it's not like this, you're being dismissive. It's like, I feel like my partner is being dismissive. And so when you then go through this process, you can be super healthy and then say that to your partner. You can say, I can feel myself getting angry because I feel like you're being dismissive of me. I'm not saying that's what you are doing. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it's triggering something in my past which is creating discomfort, and I feel now like you're doing that, and I just want to express myself. And then that gives your partner the opportunity to engage with you in a more open and honest way. They might be really unconscious and they might then try and shame you or deny it. But if they're also open, then they might be like, oh no, I wasn't doing that, I was just rushed and this happened. Or maybe they go, yeah, you know what, I was feeling unheard in that moment. And what this does is it creates really beautiful intimacy between you two. Like, you can have really amazingly secure, beautiful relationships. Like when you begin to go through connecting your thoughts to what you're feeling in every moment and trying to be as authentic as you can. Not enlightened. Like, that's how I communicate to my partner. I'm not enlightened, that doesn't have conditioning. My person gets upset about things and gets sad about things. And then what I love about the relationship is then I can express that to them, and then they can hold it. And I'm in a relationship where we really trust each other to be on what we're feeling, you know, not into like, no, you're that. That can happen, but it doesn't really happen, but it has happened in the past with us. But we just, that's just so beautiful, and that can happen for everyone. You can have really, really beautiful relationships where you're really honest and open, and both people's needs are being wanted and met, because ultimately what we want in a human relationship is like intimacy, closeness, to be seen, to be heard, to be able to express our wants and needs. It's not about always getting what you want, being able to express that. It's so beautiful. So this is often what happens prior to non-duality. Sometimes you get into non-duality first and then you get into this, but this definitely happens along the process. It's becoming more conscious of yourself on the human level, and super beautiful process. But then what happens is the non-duality pushes you even further, because the non-duality doesn't just stop at your thoughts and feelings. It asks, where do the thoughts and feelings originate from? Who is this person that has the thoughts and feelings? There's nothing wrong with the appearance of the person. That doesn't need to vanish. But it's questioning, who is this person? Like where, like is there actually somebody there? So where do these thoughts and feelings come from? And is that person conscious? And if you're inclined to, you might begin to jump off the cliff and go and explore this. So the feeling that comes up, like I feel unheard, who is the I that feels unheard? Or I feel happy, who is the I that feels happy? Prior to this investigation, there is a belief that there is a you that's conscious, that's inside this body. And then often you become more balanced, and then once this body becomes more balanced, then you begin to go deeper and you begin to ask, but who is this more balanced person? And through this investigation, even though it's not something that happens in time, it's timeless, which is just such a crazy contradiction. But through this investigation, there begins to be seen that there isn't somebody that's having these thoughts and feelings. Doesn't mean that those thoughts and feelings stop. Doesn't mean they have to stop. It doesn't mean that we don't all acknowledge there's an appearance of the person. It's just that that person isn't who's experiencing. That's just mind-blowing. That's just like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I mean, what more? That person isn't what's experiencing, and this is the true freedom of non-duality. What's experiencing is consciousness, and that person is part of the experience. So who you truly are isn't the person, and that's where I feel like you can really heal the person through that knowledge. Like what has worked like well with therapy, because when you're in therapy and you really believe you're that person, there can be so much shame and guilt and all these things coming up. It can be hard to accept what you've done or what you haven't done. You know, if you've been to drugs or you've been abusive or all these things. So that begins to deconstruct, and it's seen that there is a looking that's happening that's totally free. And this is the absolute. This is the nothing and everything. Because you can't find that looking. That looking's not a thing. That looking doesn't belong to the person. It doesn't belong behind the head or in the eyes. It is everywhere and nowhere. You can't find consciousness. You could say in a way consciousness is an illusion. Like you can't find it. It's not something that you can just grab and say, here is consciousness. But yet, there is knowing of this. That is undeniable. Not knowing of this in a thought. Not, oh, I know I'm looking at a window or a computer. But a knowing of this. There is a knowing of this. There is this awakeness that knows that it is. Just it is. This is. So that's to me the I am part. And there's also this perception. This conscious recognition of this. The I am to me is love, and the consciousness is the nothing, the emptiness. Nisargadatta Maharaj says, to know I am nothing is wisdom, to know I am everything is love. And the I am is the love part, and the looking is the emptiness. And the love is everything. The I am is everything. This is just my way of saying it. It's not the truth, because we can't have truth, so you have to find your own words for it. And that looking doesn't belong to the person. The person is appearing in the looking. It's here now, experiencing. It's awake. This is. And the looking cannot be held onto. It cannot be experienced. It cannot be a quality. So even though I call it love, that's it. That's the max I'm going to call it. But the looking doesn't care about anything in the sense of, I want the tree to be taller. I want the neighbours to disappear. I want the sofa to be red. I want my children to be well behaved. The looking has no perspective on that. It just loves everything. So it could be a paedophile in front of you, there could be a murderer in front of you, there could be a dying person. There could be immense suffering, and looking loves every part. The shoe, the floor, the person, all of it is absolutely loved, and there's no perspective on it. It doesn't think this should happen or that shouldn't happen. It's just experiencing, and it's absolute love. So you can have these like oceanic, orgasmic oneness experiences, but you can't function from that place where everything disappears and there's just this oneness and this love, this immense love. And like it's just so big, the love, like it's like you've exploded, and you can't tell that you're alive or that that's alive or anything. It's just like pure looking happening, which is love. And that looking doesn't want anything or not want anything. It's not concerned with eating, with not eating, with sleeping. It just is experiencing. It has no desire. No desire. It just is creating spontaneously without any desire. And this is why I say that you can't live like that unless you're like being looked after by other humans. Like Ramana Maharshi used to have these experiences, and they would find him with his nails like really long, and rats nibbling at him because he would be so identified with the consciousness that there was no person in there that would want to shoo away the rats or get the nails cut or eat food or cut the hair. So come back to the title. Something just happened there on my audio. Let me just make sure it's working. Hello? Seems to be working. So this is where we come back to the person. So eventually what has to happen is that unless you're being looked after in a Himalayan cave and being fed and everyone's doing your daily needs, then there has to be a person that comes back that wants to eat, that wants to go to the toilet, that wants to look after the body. But there can be this dropping of seeking where the person no longer believes that happiness is found in the world. It knows so deeply the oceanic oneness of who it is that it knows that achieving all the things in the universe that it thought would bring its happiness won't. That the freedom that's always been looked for is who you are, is the source of all things. So that profoundly shifts the person. And then what also happens is there is this oneness experience while also having a human experience. So there is this energetic expansion that's happening while this character, which is limited, is appearing. And that oneness is looking through the apparent person. And that will recondition the person over years to come. So it feels like when that happens, the desire of the character is to expand. So to be more loving, to be more expanded, to be more open, to be more authentic, to be more in line with life. And there can be lots of reconditioning and lots of healing of old traumas after that's happened. But there can also be the reconditioning prior to it happening. And the person isn't enlightened. This is the biggest mistake. So it's not the person that's enlightened. So if we go back to Ramana Maharshi, who I spoke about last week, I don't know if what I'm saying is correct, because I might have got this wrong, you know. He might have a completely different experience from me. We can't tell in the end. But if we go back to Ramana Maharshi, like, so when he's sitting there, you know, and the rat's nibbling at him and stuff, he's in this oneness experience, there is absolutely no person there. But there needs to be some form of identification when he starts interacting on a more complex level. Not when he's maybe just walking and maybe just getting food, but certainly when he's talking and interacting with people, there needs to be some form of identification with the body. Otherwise, there wouldn't be functioning. Things wouldn't happen. He would just sit there like. But because he had like a very simple life, there could be very little person there, and like that's very strong oceanic oneness experience happening. But if the more complex things you're doing, the more person there has to be. It doesn't mean that the person has to come back completely. There's always that connection to that oneness. But if you're socializing or doing more complex human relationship stuff, there has to be more of a character there in order to navigate that. Otherwise, there would just be eating of that person. Because if you go into a room without any wants, then other people's wants will take over, and you don't know if those other people are balanced. It's like this really famous saying that I really love. It's like, the problem with being open-minded is that other people come wanting to fill it up or trying to fill it up, that open-mindedness. And it's the same if you don't have any wants. So if he's totally disidentified and just in that oceanic oneness, then other people's wants will come and fill him up. And how do you know if other people's wants are balanced or not? There has to be more of a character there than that knows that. Yeah, that's complex to explain, and maybe a lot of people don't need to know that. Maybe it's more important to just keep pointing out what the consciousness is for that awakening to happen. So back to reality. Dun, dun, dun. So back to the talk. So recommendations of what to do to get to this is the most popular question, is who is the you that will ever get anywhere? Who is this person? Who are you right now? It's number one. Number two, if you feel like you are a person you're seeking, then it's really okay to do things. But that seeker that's seeking for things isn't what's going to arrive at this, because thisness is already here. So the consciousness is already here. But where you feel like a seeker, it's important you do things, otherwise you're going to do things that will make you more unhappy, more than likely, like drinking alcohol or searching through sex or internet or fame. So if you feel like you are seeking, then really wise things to do would be to explore the conditioning of the person. So line up more the thoughts and the feelings of the body. Release emotions, these types of things, so become more balanced. Have a good cognitive understanding of the person. And then secondly, moving the attention into isness. Some teachers say that encourages seeking, but I mean, I could be wrong in the end. Like, I waver with that. Like, I don't ultimately know, but if you don't do that, you're going to be seeking. You emotionally do destructive things. So whether or not that leads to the Big Bang, that is an unknowable. But it more than likely will make you more happy and balanced, and non-duality is going to present itself when it presents itself. It's here already. It's what you are. It's the birthright. So I wouldn't get caught and entangled in that, like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't. The mind loves these opposites, good, bad, should, shouldn't, do things, not do things. There's a doer, there's no doer. So don't get tangled in that. Improve on the human level at being more calm, more integrated, more balanced, putting the attention in what's now, what is, listening to non-duality, and then also the really strong recognition that there's nobody listening to non-duality and there's nobody to actually get somewhere.